Will Pitt from Geo Networks, and I head up our sales and marketing strategy into the media sector. And the work that we've done, particularly with regards to data centers, is increasing year on year, quarter on quarter actually, but their rise is inexorable. We are witnessing that change as the whole industry is, in fact, as the broadcasters and therefore all of the people that work around them move to tapeless. And what that means is that they are going from a physical source of content to a linear one. Data centers are a key part of that. They're increasingly used for storage and archive, accessibility across the board, but also they are also key elements in the online and pay markets for those broadcasters to monetize their assets, and their assets are their content. One of the key things, I think, as far as data centers are concerned, and the use of data centers as it increases, is the neutrality of them as far as access to them is concerned, and that's really where Geo come in. And of course, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't favour neutrality, but there are competitive or commercial advantages to neutrality, and particularly neutrality of access into those data centres. And I've written a blog on this particular subject, and I created the analogy of buying a ticket to a concert or an event, or whatever, at a stadium, and the organisers of the concert or the event insisting that they control the way you get there and get home. It's ridiculous, you know. Of course, that would be laughable, and I think the same applies to the content that is dropped off at data centres or picked up from data centres. As a customer or as a user of that data, you should have the say on how to access the data centres, and you should also hope that there are as many competitive network providers in those data centres, so that you use the market forces to your advantage. So you go for the best value based on a discussion of price, of course, but also separacy and the distance between each of the providers, the diversity with which they access the data centres themselves, their record as a provider, and so on and so forth. I think the discussion around data centres' influence in the market is over. You know, there's no more discussion needed. The data centre is the future, and therefore demand for the services that they provide is only going to increase. What I predict is that there will be an increase in the movement towards specialist data centres, so those that cater for certain sectors and the needs of those particular sectors. And we're seeing that particularly in broadcasting. As far as the work that we are doing, well, as you might well be aware, we have access into the greatest number of independent data centres in the UK. That is numbering over 100 now, and we're finding that the people who go to carrier-neutral data centres are also looking for that same neutrality within the data centres themselves. So in other words, the greatest amount of choice. And if we take an example of one of our main customers, ITV, in the broadcast sector, are utilising two of the data centres either side of London. They have BIS in Greenwich and LD5 in Slough, Equinix LD5 in Slough. And the reason for them selecting those two particular data centres were exactly what I've explained. So again, neutrality of the offer that the data centres themselves provide, but also the neutrality of the access into them and the security around that access. And I believe Geo were successful because of the diversity of the routes into the data centres, but also the reliability of our network in general. And ITV, along with every other broadcaster, is having to analyse and scrutinise its own business model to make sure that they are capitalising on the future of broadcasting as far as its association with video on demand and pay is concerned. It's absolutely essential that they do that, because despite recent successes with certain shows that they're putting on via the terrestrial means, in other words, to telly as we used to know it, that market is slowly dying, and they have to address that. Or if it's not dying, it's shifting. So less people are watching TV when and where we expect them to via the schedule, and they demand the right to watch it on demand whenever they want to, and increasingly via mobile means as well, so wherever they want to as well. And that's something that broadcasters, everyone associated with the broadcast chain has to address. And that is really why they have put so much emphasis on those two data centres in question, and why their new national network, which is known as the Content Superhighway, is linking every one of their key sites to those two data centres completely, dual and diversely. The formatting of content is having a huge effect on the demand for bandwidth, and of course that then relates to the demand for bandwidth into data centres, if we're going to bring it back to the original topic for discussion. But to answer your question directly, it has a huge impact on network because the demand for bandwidth goes up. So if we look at formats, firstly, the quality of those formats, particularly with regards to 3D and HD, it just means that the richer the content, the more space it uses within a piece of network, if you like, or within, on a satellite, on a transponder, however you contribute or distribute that content. The increase in the quality of the format that you're putting it out on draws on bandwidth. If you then think about the variety and the number of different formats that are in place now, so you have 3D, yes, you have HD, SD. There is talk indeed of the next formats that are coming along, so Super HD is widely discussed to be the next main format, or the next format that will drive broadcasters to seek that greater quality. There is also a huge variety of the number of different devices that people are viewing that content on, which include the gamut of mobile devices, tablets, phones, etc. And then within the home as well, the PC, yes, but the TV, the connected TV, and very often broadcasters are required to produce formats that cater for those different devices, and that of course just adds up. And if you combine that with quality and the bandwidth that higher quality fills, then you can see how bandwidth demand goes up and up. My advice to anyone who's worried about that is yes, put procedures in place to cater for the unknown where you can, but also think very carefully about the network that you're building in advance of the Olympics, and that time is now. but be very certain about why you're making those decisions. So don't take chances on net neutrality, for example. I think that's a huge thing. So if you buy off one provider, if you buy your data center access off the same provider as perhaps that runs the data center themselves, for example, which is not the model that Geo supports, then be certain that the route into that data center is absolutely diverse, so that the chances of that access into the data centers being compromised is tiny. This is stuff that you get with neutral data centers, with carrier neutral data centers. And when you buy, if you do access via neutral data centers, then just be certain of the quality of the network that you're buying. Nothing legacy, or nothing too legacy if possible, but also the SLAs that you're signing up to. Are these guys a trusted provider? Are they? Do they have total separacy? I mean, this is where Geo's sewer network in London and the access via the gas mains nationally really comes into play. There is no chance, for all intents and purposes, of our network being compromised completely because of the difference we have in access into those spaces, into those data centers. I think that's really how to handle the issue of the stress around the Olympics. Is just be sure and hedge your bets, if you like. Speed at which people can access content is going to become an increasing factor as we go forward into this new world of video on demand, and watch stuff whenever you want to. And I think the onus on content owners is going to be to provide access to that content very, very quickly. Now that can be by making the series available that much quicker than you have in the past, and maybe rethinking the model that puts out TV shows at the same time every week and staggers the series, if you like. Maybe that is a model that will be replaced. But it can also mean the way in which people are able to view highlights or content that has been live in exactly the same way as they do via websites and social media. People demand immediate replays of content, however disparate or disorganized that content has been in its collection. I mean, it's easy to be very organized about content when it's produced and then released non-live. But I think the onus on content owners of live material as well is to provide greater access to the content once it's happened. And I think all of that will happen via data centers, and the speed at which content owners can provide access to that content, either to ISPs or via CDNs, is going to be what separates the winners from the losers in the market as we go forward.